everyone, welcome back to a new video. Today I've got a special little friend out that we've had here at Carlton Carnivores for a few years now. One of my most ornery animals. This is Halila. She is a Baja California kingsnake. A lot of people might at first glance confuse her with the Mexican black kingsnake, but these guys are actually a different subspecies and found in a slightly different part of the world from the Mexican blacks. These are actually considered now a locality form of the California kingsnake. Lampropeltis jetula californiae, or just Lampropeltis californiae if you're one of those people who splits all the subspecies into their own species. These guys are native, as their name suggests, to Baja California, and specifically they are native only to the very far southern tip of the peninsula. So right down in the really dry, rocky desert areas of the very southern part of Baja. And they were once classified as their own subspecies, Jetula nitida, but that has since been revised and they've been lumped with the more widespread California kingsnake. These guys are very much like their more northern relatives in general size, behavior, and so on. They are a little bit smaller, perhaps. The California kingsnake can usually averages between 3.5 and 4.5 feet long. Some can get to almost 5 feet long. These guys can reach similar ranges in size, but they do tend to be just a little bit smaller. Halila here is a full-grown snake. She's approaching almost 5 years old at this point and won't really grow a whole lot much more, but as you can see, she's not that huge. She might be pushing 3 feet long, but she probably won't get a lot bigger than that, so she's a bit on the smaller side for what's average for them. Now, like their northern cousins also, they are actually quite variable in appearance. It might be hard to see on the video here, but I will show in a couple close-ups that she actually isn't solid black. She does have some pattern on her, and that's characteristic of the Baja kingsnakes and something you can use to distinguish them from the Mexican black kingsnakes, which live across the Sea of Cortez on mainland Mexico. These guys, the most sought-after ones are ones like Halila here, who are extremely dark, almost solid black, and with a very similarly dark pattern, a stripe that runs right down their vertebral line. So she's got one stripe that runs down her back and almost nothing else. Other Baja kingsnakes might come in the same range of patterns that the regular California kings do. Some of them are banded, some of them kind of have a mottled mosaic pattern, and then you have the striped versions. These guys seem to be a little bit more common than the banded versions, but all of them tend to be extremely dark animals, chocolate brown to black in background, and then they have tan to nearly black patterning on top. These guys live in areas that are, again, very rocky, desert-like, but like other king snakes, they tend to live in areas that are a little bit closer to water. So you'll find them in more vegetated outcrops, canyon bottoms, agriculture, so cultivated areas. They will actually do really well around there. And they are, for the most part, generalists in what they eat. So they will hunt down basically anything they can catch. But as the name kingsnake suggests, they are particularly fond of other snakes. And in fact, you can see I am wearing gloves here with her, not because she's a snake that I have to worry about or anything. You can see she's looking at my wrist right here because she smells something different. I'm wearing the gloves simply because I don't want to sit here and get chewed on for the whole video, because all she ever thinks about is food. And she seems to think that I smell like food, particularly my fingers. So she will chew on them if she smells my actual hands. And if I happen to have the smell of another snake on me, there is no getting her off, because snakes are absolutely her most favorite thing to eat. When I first got her, she actually would not eat pinky mice unless I had actually rubbed them on another snake somewhere. She would only eat things if they smelled like snakes. So she has luckily grown out of that, but they are kind of snake specialists. Even though they will eat just about anything, they love other snakes. And they do have some resistance to viper venom, so these guys will eat rattlesnakes in the wild. I'm not sure about coral snakes. I don't think they have a resistance to that, but I would have to double check. But they will eat rattlesnakes. And they are very good at overpowering them because they have a nearly perfect constriction technique where they will grab something and wrap in perfect concentric rings around the animal, and they exhibit an extremely high constriction pressure on their prey, so that allows them to really effectively dispatch other snakes. Now, in captivity, of course, you don't have to feed them snakes. Most of them will start off on mice, and they'll stay eating rodents and such all through their lives. If they don't start out on that, if they start out wanting snakes or lizards, they can usually get moved on to scented mice, and eventually just regular mice, because again, they're generalists, so that would be part of their natural diet anyway. And they're pretty easy to take care of overall too. One of the easier species. They just, especially since these guys come from a desert environment, they don't need high humidity, so there's not really anything special that you have to do to set up for that. Rather, you just have to set up a cage that's about at least 3/4 the length of the snake. Preferably the tank is longer than the snake itself, so that they have room to stretch out and move around. I'm actually hoping to be able to upgrade her from her relatively small tank right now to something bigger soon, since we have a new space here. And, oh, there she goes. She's going to try and eat my knuckle. She's looking for a spot. But anyway, so set that up. Have a water bowl that's preferably big enough for them to soak in, because even though they are desert animals, they do occasionally like to go in for a little bit of a soak. And then they will, excuse you, they will utilize that on occasion. They don't drink a lot, but they will on occasion. And then you'll want a couple of hides, some bark for them to climb on, so logs and sticks that they can travel around in. And then a couple hides on either end of the tank, a couple spread out through the area, so that they have plenty of choices, a lot of enrichment that they can choose to move around inside the tank. More enrichment also helps keep them a little more docile, less likely to focus, hyperfixate on feeding. And then their temperature, again, these are a desert animal, so during summer you want to give them your general ambient humidity somewhere around 75 or so degrees Fahrenheit, and then a hot spot that can be up to 90-95 degrees Fahrenheit for them to bask. UV light, a lot of people will say it's not necessary, but it can be beneficial for them. Even though they are somewhat nocturnal animals, these guys can sometimes be found moving around any time of the day, so they will take advantage basking in the sun, and so they will get use of UV rays. They will benefit from that. No, you cannot eat those. Looks like the gloves aren't working quite as well as I'd hoped now. But she's really focused on the fingers now. So during the summer, again, warm conditions, and then during the winter, it does cool down in Baja, and that is what will trigger these guys to go through their breeding cycles, is that it does cool down, days in the 60s or 70s, sometimes cooler nights in the 50s. So they will often slow down, might stop eating during that period, and then you warm them up in spring, and that's what will trigger a breeding behavior. Now, when dealing with the common king snakes, because they are snake eaters, breeding is a little bit more touchy than a lot of other species, because you do have to worry about if the two snakes will look at each other as potential mates and not simply try and eat each other. A lot of people who breed king snakes will actually keep an eye on both of the animals throughout the process, so when they introduce the male to the female, all the way up until they are done and they remove the two from each other's presence, because if you leave them together, more than likely one will end up eating the other. So these are not snakes that you can cohabit by any means, and even when breeding, you want to be very careful with them. And Not every snake is as much of a turd as this one is. There are a lot of king snakes that are very well behaved, beautiful animals. It just kind of depends on what personality you happen to get, and also how well you take care of them. It's important not to keep them too hot either, because that can sometimes increase their preference for trying to eat things. And it's been known actually keeping king snakes too hot will sometimes result in them trying to eat themselves. She luckily is not quite that nuts. If she bites herself in her frenzy trying to eat my hands, she recognizes that it's her immediately and she'll back off. But if you get one, again, it's a snake that you're probably not likely to have any issues with feeding, and they're extremely easy to set up and care for, and it's a roll of the dice whether you'll get one that you might just want to wear gloves while handling, or one that is an extremely laid-back, placid, curious animal. Because king snakes, when they aren't focused on food, they are quite curious, very inquisitive animals, and they love to explore. And of course, as you can see here, even if you don't handle them very often, they are just a beautiful snake to work with too. Shiny black, their bellies are iridescent, and they shine with rainbow colors in the sun. So, certainly, if you're not looking for a snake necessarily that you just want to handle all the time, if you want a snake that's good for, say, display, because these guys, they do like burrowing, so deep substrate is good for them, but they will often also come out, poke around during the daytime sometimes, and you can find them especially in the mornings and the evenings. They'll be active, poking around their tank, so they can make a pretty decent display animal if you want to set up a good kind of a display artistic cage. These guys are actually a really good option for that. So that's about all that I have for these guys, but there's always plenty of more information to come. I've got other snakes that I'll be doing videos for later on, and of course, if you're familiar with the channel already, you know the other half of what I do is the carnivorous plants, which you can see behind me, so I'll have more videos coming up on that. If you'd like to help support production of educational videos like this, please consider joining as a patron at patreon.com/hcarlton. That helps fund production of educational videos, taking the documentary trips, which I am planning on doing again soon. Coming this April, I'm hoping to be able to fund a trip to Southwest Arizona where we can find the relatives of these guys, the Mexican black king snake and the California kingsnakes. So consider joining there. You also get exclusive benefits back if you're a member. You can also donate at ko-fi, ko-fi.com/CarltonCarnivores. The website with the shop with plants and sometimes baby snakes available for sale can be found at carltoncarnivores.com. You can also find the means to contact me there, as well as the database, the educational resource that I am working on building for files for different species of carnivorous plants and different kinds of snakes. You can also find the blog there, where I have written articles on snakes like these, some of the plants. Or you can also find videos, little clips, photos that I'm always sharing as I'm going about my business on social media. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, at Carlton Carnivores. But until next time, I'm Hawk and Carlton. And this is Halila. And this is Carlton Carnivores.